Last night, the President of the United States stood before Congress, before 330 million Americans, and painted a picture of a country roaring back to life. Gas at $1.99, the worst inflation in history, defeated. 8 wars ended. A booming economy unlike anything we've ever seen. It sounded powerful. It sounded historic. But here's the question. Washington isn't asking loud enough. What if most of it wasn't true? And more importantly, what does that mean for you? State of the Union addresses have always been political theater. Every president uses the moment to score points, paint their record in the best light, and rally their base. That's not new. That's Washington. But there's a difference between spin and fabrication, between optimism and fiction. And last night, fact checkers, including data from the Federal Reserve, the Congressional Budget Office, and AAA, found one of the most error-dense addresses in recent memory. This isn't about party politics. This is about your wallet, your job, and your future. So let's break it down, claim by claim, and ask the harder question. When a president misstates the economy to this degree, who actually pays the price? Start with gas prices, because Trump made this one vivid and personal. He told the American people gas is now below $2.30 a gallon in most states, and in some places, $1.99 a gallon. Sounds like relief, right? Here's the reality. According to AAA data from the very night of his speech, not a single state had an average gas price below $2.37 per gallon. Only 2 states averaged below $2.50. And that magical $1.99 figure? Petroleum analysis firm GasBuddy found exactly 4 stations across the entire country selling below $2 out of roughly 150,000 tracked. That's 0.003% of American gas stations. Trump even cited a speech in Iowa where he claimed he saw gas at $1.85. Someone in that Iowa crowd shouted back, live on record, no, $2.63. The gas station right outside that very venue, $2.69 per gallon. Here's what's important. Gas prices have come down during Trump's term, from $3.12 on Inauguration Day to around $2.95 tonight. That's real. That's worth saying. But he didn't say that. He nearly doubled the actual improvement. Why does that matter? Because American families make real decisions based on real numbers. When leaders exaggerate, it distorts expectations, and it erodes trust exactly when trust matters most. And this is where things get serious. Trump described inheriting a stagnant economy that is now roaring like never before. But look at what the numbers actually say. U.S. economic growth in 2025 was 2.2%. That's lower than every single year of the Biden presidency, including 2024's 2.8% growth. The unemployment rate rose from 4.0% to 4.3% during Trump's term so far. Total jobs added in 2025? $181,000, the lowest since 2020, the year COVID shut down the entire country. Trump also claimed he inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country. That's a line that lands emotionally. But inflation in Biden's final month was 2.9%. The all-time record inflation in American history was 23.7%, set in 1920. Biden's peak in June 2022 was 9.1%, a 40-year high. Significant and painful, yes. But worst in history? Not even close. And here's the twist. Inflation has fallen. It's now at 2.4%. But overall grocery prices are still up 2.1% since January 2025. Far more grocery items got more expensive this presidency than got cheaper. Trump cited eggs. He cited chicken. He left out the full picture. But here's what most people missed in last night's address. The single most economically consequential false claim Trump made. And he made it twice. He told the American people that foreign countries are paying for his tariffs. Tariffs are paid for by foreign countries, he said with complete confidence. Here's the truth, and this one hits directly in your pocket. According to an analysis by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, nearly 90% of the economic burden from Trump's tariffs falls on U.S. firms and consumers, not foreign exporters. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office went even further, finding that U.S. consumer prices rise by 95% of the domestic cost of tariffs, a combination of businesses passing costs down the supply chain and reduced competition driving prices up. Tariffs are not a foreign tax. They are, in practice, an American tax on American buyers.
When a president tells the public the opposite of what the Federal Reserve and the CBO have concluded, twice in one speech, that is a story that matters, because it shapes whether the public supports or questions trade policy that directly affects the cost of everything they buy. Here's the broader strategic reality. Trump also claimed he passed the largest tax cuts in American history. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, nonpartisan, ranked the recent bill 7th since 1918 as a share of GDP. Ronald Reagan's 1981 package was nearly twice as large by that measure. He claimed he eliminated taxes on Social Security. What actually passed was a temporary, limited deduction for some seniors over 65, and millions of Social Security recipients will still owe taxes on their benefits. He claimed cutting fraud would balance the federal budget overnight. The federal deficit was $1.8 trillion last year. The Government Accountability Office's maximum estimate for annual federal fraud is $521 billion. The math doesn't work, not even close. He claimed D.C. is now one of the safest cities in the country after his National Guard deployment. Crime data expert Jeff Asher found D.C. ranked 9th in murder rate and 12th in violent crime rate among the 50 largest U.S. cities in 2025. That is not one of the safest cities in America. This is where it shifts, because these aren't random exaggerations. They cluster around the same themes: the economy, personal safety, government competence, and presidential power. They are the emotional architecture of a political brand. And when that brand relies on claims that don't hold up, the people absorbing those claims as truth are making decisions, voting, spending, policy support, based on a distorted map of reality.
Let's zoom out. America's credibility, globally and domestically, depends partly on its leaders making truthful, verifiable claims. When a State of the Union address is widely fact-checked and found wanting, it does something subtle but corrosive. It weakens the signal. It makes it harder for allies to calibrate. It creates noise in the marketplace of American public opinion. Consider the tariff claim alone. If tens of millions of Americans believe foreign countries are footing the bill for trade policy, they're less likely to push back when those costs show up in prices. That's not a small thing. That's a feedback loop that affects real economic behavior. And on the global stage, when Trump claimed he ended 8 wars, one of his listed conflicts was not a war, but a diplomatic dam dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia. Another, the Congo-Rwanda conflict, had a peace agreement that was never signed by the rebel coalition actually doing the fighting. Armed clashes between Thailand and Cambodia resumed months after Trump's brokered ceasefire. Competence in foreign policy requires accurate accounting. If the ledger is padded, the strategy may be too. Now, and this matters, there are real accomplishments in the record. Gas prices have come down. Inflation has declined from 3.0% to 2.4%. The economy is growing, if more slowly than before. Some foreign policy engagements have produced results worth acknowledging. Trump can legitimately claim credit for aspects of all of this. The problem isn't that his record is bad. The problem is that overstating it by this much, $18 trillion becoming $9.7 trillion, 40-year inflation becoming worst in history, 4 gas stations becoming most states, turns a defensible record into an unverifiable one. When the exaggeration is this consistent and this large, it doesn't just reflect spin. It reflects a calculated bet that most Americans won't check. And so here is the question that should stay with you after this video. If a president overstates economic gains, misattributes who pays the tariffs, exaggerates crime reduction, inflates foreign policy wins, and claims fiscal miracles that simple arithmetic disproves, what is the cost of that to the country? Not politically, economically, strategically. The cost is calibration. It becomes harder to measure real progress when the baseline keeps moving. It becomes harder to hold any administration accountable when facts become negotiable. And it becomes harder for America to make clear-eyed decisions about trade, about security, about investment, when the numbers its leaders cite are consistently, demonstrably off. America's greatest strength has never been just military power or economic scale. It's been the ability to look clearly at a problem and solve it. That requires accurate information flowing from the top down. Last night's speech was many things: strategic, forceful, at times genuinely compelling. But it was not, in many of its most important claims, accurate. And in the long run, that's not a partisan issue. That's an American one. If you want sharp, data-driven analysis on American power, policy, and what it actually means for your life, not spin from either side, but the real picture, subscribe to Washington Today. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who watched that speech and believed every word. Because the most powerful thing an American can do right now isn't pick a side, it's know the facts.